Hello, I'm Murray Carter from Carter Cutlery. I want to do a brief reflection on my appearance on the episode Forged in Fire on the History Channel. I was very privileged to be invited to compete in the Forged in Fire competition style TV program, and I want to talk briefly about the blades I made for that program and how they performed exactly the way I expected them to, but unfortunately how that also resulted in them not performing to a degree that I would win the competition. So as you may know, if you're a follower of Carter Cutlery, that I specialize in Japanese style kitchen cutlery as well as outdoor knives, but I specialize in laminated blades. And the whole idea is to take a hard steel and marry it or pair it to a softer steel so that you have a blade that has very distinct characteristics. It will make a tough blade, a blade that is impossible to break. It'll make a blade that will be very easy to sharpen because the carbon steel edge only compromises about 20% of the exposed metal, and when you have to sharpen the whole secondary edge, 80% of what you're sharpening away is softer steel. It also makes a blade when they're water quenched or that will take an incredible edge and will hold that edge for a very long time. Those are the characteristics of the Japanese blades that are so desirable that all across this continent people are getting rid of their European style kitchen knives and switching to Japanese. And it's also what makes our outdoor line of knives and the neck knives and so on very popular. However, when I was invited to take part in this competition, I had some very good concerns. The concern was that most of the other bladesmiths were going to specialize in Western style bladesmithing, which is primarily homogeneous steel blades. Blades that are more or less have the same characteristic throughout the whole blade, from the cutting edge to the spine of the knife, from the outside of the knife to the inner core of the knife. And they're usually heat treated in such a way that gives them a great springiness and a resistance to deformation. They're not particularly well known for incredible cutting edges or edges that hold for a long time, or that are easy to sharpen particularly, but they are strong in a way that they'll flex to a certain degree and spring back straight again, and you can abuse them in a lot of circumstances, and they hold their shape. So I chose in the competition to make both blades that I had to make out of a laminate. I used mild steel and 52-100 steel for the first knife that we made in New York in their studio. And when it was tested, it cut really, really well and held a great edge. But in one of the sequences where the blade was abused a little bit, the blade did bend. And the judges in the program said, maybe your heat treat wasn't good because the blade bent. But what they don't understand, or they didn't understand, is that all Japanese laminated blades, if pushed to a certain degree, will bend, but they'll never break. And you can always bend them back straight again and continue using them. Whereas a homogeneous steel blade will resist bending, but then once it passes a certain point, the blade will snap. So there's pros and cons for both styles. And then subsequently, when I made the longer blade for the final competition, I chose a blade steel that was a 1035 spring steel on the outside and a blue super steel core on the inside. It was because I happen to have a laminated bar that was of the right size, and I figured, given the time constraints, which was 5 days to make and complete this blade before we shipped off back to New York, that's the steel that I chose. And everything was going great, and then I had to make a tough decision. Do I water quench this blade or do I oil quench the blade? And I didn't know really what the blade was going to be tested for, but because it was a long sword-like blade, I figured it was going to be smacked around and abused, and I was going to go for toughness. I know that steel from the past, when it's quenched in water, the 1035 spring steel on the outside hardens like a spring and makes it exceedingly tough and spring-like a spring, but then the blue super steel core on the inside gets hard, and you can sharpen up to a razor's edge and it'll hold that edge for a long time. So Part of me wanted to water quench, but I had two concerns. A, if the blade came out of the quenchant, the water, warped or twisted, given the time constraints that I had, I was worried I might not be able to get it straight within the time frame. And straightness for me is very, very important. And then secondly, not knowing exactly what the blade was going to be used for, you know, and I suspected they were going to put it through some kind of you know, endurance testing. I decided that an oil quench, which sacrifices a little bit of the Rockwell hardness and sacrifices some of the spring-like characteristics on the outside of the blade, would make the blade overall more durable and absolutely break-proof. You know, you could swing that around the battlefield, you wouldn't have to worry about it breaking. Nothing could break that blade. But I did fear that given the wrong type of stresses, like stresses to the side of the blade, that it might bend. Well, we got to New York, and if you've seen the program, or if you're going to see the program, you'll see that my blade, when it was chopping through bamboo, did take a bit of a bend, and it held it, and that cost me the competition. And, you know, having poured myself out to 2 weeks to do that, it would have been nice to win, but I did lose fair and square. My competitor, he made a blade that was essentially a homogeneous steel blade and treated like a spring. He treated like a spring, and it withstood that testing much better. In essence, you know, to compare it into the car world, I took a Ferrari to an off-road motor course. You know, I had a Japanese blade being submitted to testing that was more biased towards homogeneous Western style blades. Would I do it again? To win the competition, I probably would have water quenched, knowing what I know now. And I know that the steel and my bladesmithing techniques and skills would be up to it. But since we can't go back in time, knowing what I know now, I wanted to apply what I learned moving forward. And that brings us to our newest, most recent knife, our FS1 combat knife. And if you've seen our other video, you'll know that this is a collaboration between a 20-year Navy SEAL veteran and myself, who are good friends. And we put our heads together for the design, but then when it came to the steel for the knife, we were very clear on what we wanted to make. We wanted to make it ultra lightweight, easy to sharpen, hold a great edge, but be strong and springy-like. And to get that, we use the same steel, the 1035 on the outside and the blue super steel core on the inside, because that's what I have. I may make some out of white steel core in the future, because I've got some of that too. But we water quench the blades, and that makes all the difference. You know, oil quench blade would make it tougher all around, but these blades now also have a great spring-like characteristic, like a homogeneous blade, but they have that Rockwell 64 core, which will take a razor's edge and hold that for a crazy long time. So I just wanted to take a moment and reflect on, you know, the program and why I chose the steel that I did and why I oil quenched instead of water quenched, and knowing in my heart that water quench is always better for the Japanese blades. With these new blades moving forward, the blades that I make and sell to my customers, I did water quench, and I will continue to water quench. And I just wanted to share my thoughts with you. So thank you for watching. I hope you watched the Forged in Fire series, and I hope you found it informative, entertaining, exciting, and maybe inspired you to want to make some knives. And if you want to make some knives, we can teach you how to do that here as well. Anyway, it's Murray Carter from Carter Cutlery saying stay sharp.